Oh, Hido, and welcome to me trying to explain Homestuck stuff again. Thank you, Marie, or congrats, I guess, for being the first pupa. Hello, Nightfang. First is game guessing. I have no idea what this is. Probably Paper Mario. Dang it. This is definitely Boggly Woods, so it's Paper Mario, the Thousand Year Door. Yep, definitely. Dang it. Okay. Well, they're in a boxing ring, so it must be Donkey Kong 64. I'm assuming this is one of the Tekken games. Not being funny. Not a Tekken game? Dead or Alive, maybe? Bam. Squirrel still in our fucking apples. There's a squirrel. Also, congrats on the 160 stream streak. Alright, let me get my slide pulled up. Project climb up an apple tree in the back, and roommate walked out and chased it off. That motherfucker. Found one snipped off the tree. They're hungry. I guess it is spring. And squirrels are notoriously bad at finding their own nuts they buried. Alright. So listen. In Homestuck, there's these things called aspects, right? Every character is tied to one of them. We got a wheel here. Kind of like Homestuck's versions of elements, I guess, but they also have like narrative stuff going on, not just like, you know, elemental gameplay type stuff happening. Every character also has a class, but I feel like if I tried to do aspects and classes in one stream, I'd have to do all the aspects in 2 hours and then all the classes in 2 hours. I feel like I'd have to end up, I don't know, giving a very basic, vague idea of everything. But yes, so as you can see, it's basically a zodiac wheel in a sense. And we're gonna start the top at noon on the clock, so to speak, with breath. These are the 3 people we know who are attached to the breath aspect. That is Rufio on the far left, Tavros in the middle, and John on the right. It actually 5'10". The King of Neverland. He is based off of the Rufio from the movie Hook. So, you know. So yes, the aspect of breath, as you can, that's the breath symbol up in the top left. As you could probably guess, it's the wind element in a sense, air. If you want to look at it literally, air, wind, yada yada yada. It manifests in different ways depending on who's using it. Uh, of course, because otherwise it would be kind of lame from a narrative sense. Everyone had the same ability. So I mean, the character we see use it the most, unsurprisingly, is John, considering he's the main character. In the literal sense, John, uses it to make wind go whoosh. He does the windy thing, as it's quite literally said in the text, the ancient texts. He can make wind, swoosh around him. He can become wind, literally just uses it to like dodge getting hit by attacks. Basically a teleport, I guess. If you've ever played a fighting game that has a move that lets you, like, if you hit it right on time, it lets you teleport behind the person instead of taking the hit. Yeah, it's that. John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. His name is my name too. But yeah, narratively or figuratively, I don't know, however you want to word it. Breath is, I feel like breath is the more obvious one. If I asked someone to explain to me what this one would mean on like a figurative level, I feel like it would be an easy one. Freedom is like a big thing. I should also asterisk that like most of what I'm going to talk about beyond like the literal uses of these things is like speculation on my part, and if you talk to different people, they'll probably have different interpretations of all of these, but that's how it be. So I think certain things will be true across everyone's interpretations. Yes. Anyway, freedom, spontaneity, such as that. It can, and freedom is kind of vague though, to be fair. Like Rufio literally in one timeline becomes the leader of a like revolutionary army. He grows wings, which, to be fair, all trolls are implied to grow wings when they get older, I'm pretty sure, because you god tier, you get wings. As a troll. Anyway, he has big old wings and he flies around, and interestingly, these two, Rufio and Tavros, both also are of the blood caste on of the trolls that allows them to speak to animals, which plays into the whole breath thing, and the fact that they're specifically speaking to animals also could arguably play into the freedom thing as well. But yes, they can speak with animals and exhibit a level of control over them. I feel like an important thing to note is that if I say that something, an aspect has a certain idea or symbol or something tied to it, it works in a coin situation where it's like being in the breath aspect can mean having freedom, or it can mean a lack thereof. It can mean giving freedom or taking it away, but it's the fact that it's something to do with those ideas and certain tropes and stuff. I feel like a good way to describe a person's class and aspect is it's almost kind of like if you had 144, or I guess if you want to be really technical, 166 or no 168 different character archetypes and you were to say that all characters can fit into one of them, that would kind of be, you know, what the class and aspect when combined sort of represent. So two characters who are both in the breath aspect and of the page class, like Tavros, would probably have a lot of similarities, but that doesn't mean they necessarily have to be the exact same character or anything. You know, kind of like how two tsunderes aren't necessarily the exact same character, you know. But yes, where was I? Yeah, so freedom, spontaneity, blah blah blah. They also come with things like being kind of evasive or detached. Tavros's whole thing is that he's had a lot of bad shit happen to him, so he's sort of just like, if I just sit around waiting long enough, something good will happen to me and my life will just get better, kind of mindset. John tends to kind of ignore his emotional issues and just sort of pretend they don't exist. I don't even think that's true. I think he just genuinely forgets they exist and just doesn't tackle them. Just like naturally kind of floats like a wind out of his a leaf in the wind out of his brain. So yeah, floats like a goat. Yes, exactly. Mini goats floating outside my house right now. So yeah, they can be kind of like, they could, one person in the breath aspect could be very like, have a very refreshing personality with how they seem to sort of be very light on their emotional or mental feet. They don't get like stuck in ruts too often, and they don't get bogged down by a lot of details, but they can also be a bit unreliable sometimes. I feel like they feel, I feel like breath people tend to feel suffocated or stuck a lot more easily than other people in other aspects would. Yeah, let's see. It's kind of like, a good way to put it would be, they are like a bird in a cage. And, you know, somebody who's very on top of their shit, so to speak, would realize that they're skinny enough to slip through the bars and fly away. And on the opposite end, you'd have people who, where the door is wide open and they still think that they're trapped and can't leave. But again, it comes back to the idea that like their freedom and spontaneity and their fickleness and sometimes flighty thoughts and such. Yeah, I kind of like that. Yeah. John, I think a good example is it's called Homestuck because we spend a lot of the early part of the story literally, or we spend all of Act 1 with John running around his own home. And despite having, John has a very like nice life. Like, you know, that sometimes there's people who like seem like they have really good lives, but their lives actually suck. But I would say John is genuinely like just being kind of an angsty teenager. Like his dad is very nice and tries very hard, and John just kind of gets to fuck around his house all he likes without any consequence. But John feels unfulfilled as a 13-year-old. He feels trapped in his own home, so to speak. And even when he goes outside, something about the neighborhood, and it's like almost copy pasted buildings, you know, I would say he kind of views them like the bars of his cage. And then John's very much the type that needs to be doing something. Which leads to him being very depressed in the epilogues when the adventure's over. And I think that's a good actually example because, like I said, Tavros is very happy just to sit around and hope something happens to him, where John feels like he's constantly keeping himself busy because he can't sit still. And I feel like that's a good example of my whole two sides of the same coin sort of dealio. Of course, John goes on to arguably have the most and the least freedom, depending on how you look at it and what parts of the story you're in. So yes, I would say that's probably a good way to explain the breadth aspect. Feel free to ask questions, by the way, because I'm doing this kind of off my head. But I'm also trying not to get stuck on any one aspect for too long. So yes. What's my favorite fruit? Okay, ask questions related to the lesson, please. But it's raspberries. Bam. All right, moving on to life. So similar to how if you look in the top left, Deep Breath Wind is an OP and weak element at times. It really, all of the elements are OP or weak depending on the character and how they use it. John's abilities are very OP. Tavros's aren't at all. Tavros arguably Tavros never uses a literal wind ability. His are all figurative and don't really come into play until very far into the story, when he manages to put together a army of ghosts. So it's more of a literally breath, in that he becomes somebody who can speak a group who were sitting around waiting for their second death to come, because all the ghosts exist in the void, but the void is slowly being destroyed by the main villain, and no one's really bothering to do anything about it or cares enough to do anything about it. And Tavros rallies all the ghosts to actually want to do something about it. But yeah, I feel like every ability is kind of OP if you think about it in the right way. They're all pretty vague. I feel like some of them seem really on the nose, like breath or time, but you can kind of do a lot with them if you really think about it. Yes, so the life element. Instead of a breeze, the symbol looks more like a plant or vines growing up. Life is about, like, growth. It can be, like being healthy physically. It can be about having a lot of money to fall back on, being very, flourishing physically, mentally, monetarily, any sort of way, really. I think they would have a strong idea of the way things should be, or like what would be like the natural way of things, I feel like. Or they'd have, I guess, to go back to that, they would have a really strong feelings about that, or they'd have no feelings at all, or something. But I think that would probably play into their art. Um, uh, they would kind of treat, I think they would treat their life and the way they went about things kind of like taking care of a plant. They'd either be really good at it or really bad at it, but you know. So I'm trying to think of an example. I feel like they probably, whether they were like being gay is unnatural or being gay is natural, I think they would, hey Cry, welcome, focus a lot on the idea of if it was natural or not. And I think a breath person would be more about like, I don't, you know, they wouldn't focus on the naturalness, they would focus on the freedom to do what you wanted. But yes, when I say monetarily prospering or whatever I said earlier, flourishing, is that what I said? You have Mina on the left, literal empress. You have Pfeffry in the middle, literal empress. You have Jane on the right, who is the heir to the Betty Crocker empire. They all have the mullahs. I guess Pfeffry doesn't really have money per se, but she is at the top of the literal and figurative food chain on Alternia. Jane has a lot of money and also wants a bunch of kids, which is, I think, the idea of, you know, her wanting a lot of kids plays into that as well. And she is a maid of life, so I suppose that's not surprising. Mina wants money. It's all about getting the monies. Not for any reason other than to have it. And an interesting thing also too is that the two troll life players here, Mina and Pfeffry, they are of the blood caste that has the longest lifespan, so you know it's fun. Definitely intentional, but a fun little thing that might I could see people kind of missing. Yeah, it also is like the healing, or it seems to be the healing / vampiric class, because Mina's a thief of life. She can literally like, she can steal life, but she can also like steal your ability to die. We see an alternate timeline version of Mina turn someone into make someone unable to die so she can turn them into a psychic battery that powers her warship that flies through space. Jane is the healer and she can res everyone one time. Everyone gets one resurrection. So if they die, she can bring them back the one time. Pfeffry doesn't, we don't really see Pfeffry have any like literal abilities. And ironically, I'm pretty sure she's the first troll character we see die. But I think she's also the first ghost we see. And she's responsible for the ghosts being able to exist in the void in the first place. So in a way, she created a second life, basically. not the video game, for everyone who died. So, you know, that's fun. Oh, actually, I forgot. Mina got herself and all her friends killed so that they could go into the afterlife as ghosts. But she did that because it was because their attempt at playing through the game was fucked, so they needed to there's a whole thing where, like, if you're the game, because, you know, every group is playing, like, it manifests as a literal game in their world, but of course it ends up being a much crazier isekai sort of situation. But yeah, if your game's fucked and you can't win, you can do a thing called a scratch, which resets it, and you know, it shuffles things around. So by doing that, she created the second set of trolls, which is where Fefri and Tavros and all of them are from, who were able to actually play through the game properly, which then led to the humans being created, etc. So by stealing the life of her and her companions and turning them into ghosts, she sort of allowed things to continue so that other people could win. So yeah. A lot of ways to interpret it on a lot of different literal and figurative levels, I suppose. But yeah. It's one of the more straightforward ones, I suppose. Probably one of the ones I have the least, like, strong opinions on, really. Like, I don't know. I'm sure there are other people who have way more thoughts on the life aspect than me, to be fair. Yeah. That's life. The game of life, even. All right. Light. Wow. This one, you know, I don't know if this one would be obvious or not. It's luck, knowledge, relevance, those sorts of things. Luck especially plays in a big part for Vriska there on the left. She can steal people's luck, literally. Knowledge is more of a thing for Rose, who you see on the right there. She's very smart, very bookish. When we meet, ironically, despite being the seer of light, when we meet her, she's a edgy goth girl in her big house out in the woods, and it's raining super hard, and she has, like, a book of eldritch creatures in her room and such. So yeah. Yeah, so knowledge, light, relevance. Vriska also plays into the relevance aspect, actually, because she always wants to be the most important person in any conversation or in anything going on around her. She inserts herself into other people's lives to try to make herself the most important person in that person's life, whether that's good or bad. She's kind of one of those all press is good, or all press is good press. I feel like that's not the right, press isn't the right word, but you get what I mean. So long as people, the worst thing that could ever happen to Vriska is people forgetting she exists. So she'd rather She would not stab you in the back. She would stab you in the front so she can look you in the eyes and make sure you knew it was her. But yes. So literal thingies that get used. Vriska's the Thief of Light. She can steal people's luck. She is annoyingly relevant to the point that I think it fucks up her character, but it does work in a sense. She, like I said, she really likes to put herself in other people's lives, whether that's good or bad. Just in a way steal their relevance by becoming she basically wants to be more important in their lives than they are in their own lives, I would say. Aranea, I don't actually know how to pronounce it, but I don't think there's canon pronunciations for any characters technically. I say Aranea. Oh, actually, I should mention that for a fun little literal thing, I guess. Vriska's, every character has a unique like weapon they use. Vriska's is 8d8 that she rolls, and depending on how high or low the roll is, it does different stuff. So you know, she's all about luck, and she rolls dice as her weapon. And she likes to LARP, live action role play. But she's LARPing. What do they call it? They call it flarping, I think. Yeah. It's a much more real and dangerous. So in like real life, if you LARPed, you wouldn't actually like get hurt ideally. But in troll culture, when you become an adult, at least on the troll on Alternia, where Vriska and them from, Vriska, Tavros, Pfeffery, and some more trolls will meet. When you become an adult, you get sent to space to go to war. So they're encouraged to literally kill each other as they're growing up. It's a very like, if you die as a child, it's because you were weak. Literally, that is that. There are no adults on Alternia. There are robots. And it's all about calling the weak. Neverland. It's like evil Neverland. And she's the worst kind of Tinkerbell analogy ever. She tries to be the Tinkerbell to Tavros's Pupa Pan. I don't think, well, she's the fairy. She doesn't call herself Tinkerbell. There's no like canon name for Tinkerbell. I mean, there's Tinkerbowl, but that's a little different. Anyway. Yeah. Aranea is a sylph of light. And sylphs are like the healers, but they're also very meddlesome. They tend to be meddlesome type people. And similar to Vriska, she likes to insert herself into other people's lives, but she likes to she wants to be the person that makes other people do great things, but make it seem like that person did it on their own to a degree. Although she does get really warped ideas of her own morals and stuff later on, which leads to everyone except John and Roxy dying in a big fight. She also dies during it. So yeah, but that's a whole thing. Anyway, where was I? But yes, she can heal people, knowledge, their relevance and such, their luck. She's able to, but by the time we really see her do much healing, she's already kind of warped into an antagonistic figure, and she's kind of using it for bad, which I like, because I like seeing healing used for bad. I think it's not explored enough. She heals. She does what I would consider healing a different character's relevance. There's a character who is so to not to get too much into classes, but the page class is like the worst class at level 1 essentially, but if you max it out, it's actually the best. So there's a guy named Jake who is a Page of Hope, and he's sitting around moping. Well, it's more like the Onion Knight from Final Fantasy 3, but yeah. Yeah, he's moping because he thinks he had a lot of bravado at first, but now he's just like, wow, I suck. So she like channels her healing into him, and his powers, he basically gets boosted to his max powers for a temporary amount of time, and becomes a giant beacon of hope, literally a giant glowing orb of white light, and becomes so bright and shining you literally can't ignore him. Like his text in his text when you're reading, it becomes like massive and like takes up like one word is basically the equivalent of like 10 lines of text when he like says anything, and it's like glowing, and it just takes up like the whole text box. So, you know, I guess a very literal interpretation of like healing someone's relevance. Of course, this is bad because Jake didn't actually earn, you know, this. Like he didn't actually get fixed properly. She just like made him feel fixed for like a short amount of time. But yes, and then Rose is the seer of light. Her abilities manifest in allowing her to quite literally see the most fortuitous path forward. But she does have an interesting arc that has sparked a lot of debate on what is it called? There's a word everyone uses for it, but I can't remember. Inversion. It's inversion theory. The idea that every class spec, which is your class and aspect, you know, like Seer of Light, has an opposite. And that if you move too far away from, I guess, what you would consider your true self, you start becoming like the opposite side of the coin, I suppose. So she gets very grimdark and has a lot of like, instead of being a seer, she starts like casting spells and gets very like dark and evil and like blacks out areas she's in. So according to inversion theory, she would be a mage of void as opposed to a seer of light, where she to invert. And I guess she does during that bit. So, but I guess inversion theory is kind of interesting, but I feel like it's kind of also off topic a little bit, but kind of. Trying to think of an example to like wrap up the inversion theory thing, though. Just like, I mean, I guess it's literally like you see Rose standing there and she's got like a sun on her shirt and like these orange this orange seer outfit, but when she's in her sort of like grim dark thing that people would kind of consider when she's sort of inverted, she literally has like a black aura around her, and is in like dark like purples and blacks and stuff, and her weapon is they're knitting needles, but she wields them like, especially during that part, she wields them like they're like magic wands. And oh, and she doesn't speak English when she's like that. I forgot about that. She speaks in a weird eldritch tongue, um, and spends her free time leading up to when she goes like fully grimdark, looking into the horror terrors, which are eldritch monstrosities that live in the void, and speaking with them. And I guess another aspect of her going all dark mode, which does come into play later and does actually support inversion theory, is that when she fully goes grimdark, the trolls have a thing called was it Trollian, which is basically like, you know, imagine if you had Discord, but you could right click on someone's profile and it would just like a magic's, you know, as if a magic camera appeared above them and you were just like watching them in their room. It allows you to do that. But whenever that point happens for Rose where she goes full grimdark and inverts, none of the humans can be seen. Take that as a person, love that as a yandere. Yeah, it gets used in some interesting ways that aren't relevant to this, but it is relevant specifically here because it stops working on all the humans during this period where Rose is grimdark. And the build up to it is interesting because there's references to the point on the timeline where there's a blackout, and it's like what happens that leads up to that, and then, you know, you get to it and it's kind of an interesting payoff. Another interesting thing about an interesting literal thing, we'll get back to this when we get to Void as well, but when we're building up to like game over, which was when Arania fucks things up and gets everyone killed, there's an interesting thing where Rose sort of, it's like one step forward, two steps back sort of thing, where like she's achieved, she's god tiered, which is like achieving like max level, you could argue. Not really, but I guess it's more like, again, to go to Final Fantasy 1, it's like when you what is it called in that, the master classes or something? I don't remember what it's called actually in Final Fantasy 1, but when you go from like fighter to knight or white mage to white wizard and whatever, kind of like that, you get to like a secondary class and you get like way better powers and stuff. She gets to that and it's very cool and she unlocks new abilities, but then there's a period where they're kind of stuck riding through space for 3 years doing nothing, and this Rose, so Rose's mom, I should add this part. Also, 2 of the 3 of these have mommy issues. I don't know if Arania had mommy issues. She never talks about it from what I remember. She talks a lot though, so I could be forgetting it. Like she talks a lot. For a character who doesn't get introduced until like 60% of the way through the story, she has a lot of dialogue. But anyway, Rose's mom is very mysterious and also drinks from dusk to dawn and then back around to dusk. Like every time you see her, she's got a drink in her hand. She is in fact an alcoholic. She is an alcohol monitor. And Rose kind of resents her mom for that, but when they're stuck on the when they're stuck flying through space for 3 years, Rose also becomes an alcoholic, and it's an interesting thing where she kind of, she's so tapped into as like a seer of light. She's so tapped in to like everything around her that she sort of, it's like the curse of knowledge. I feel like she's she wants to kind of shut it off a bit, and then it becomes a thing where she wants to shut it off all the time, so she's just constantly drunk. It's very interesting. Yeah, I guess to wrap up the light aspects, they're very curious people who like to be tend to be very relevant, or I guess depending on your class, you might be the opposite, but it centers around knowledge, luck, relevancy, those kinds of things. Curiosity and such. Knowing everything or knowing nothing, I suppose. Or at least thinking you know everything, which Rose does. I think she knows everything when we meet her early on. But anyway, yeah, I feel like this one's fairly straightforward though. But yes, that's the light aspect. Time. So time is interesting because the main villain is time. And we have, as you can see, we have 4 time characters, which is only true of time and space, if I'm remembering right. But anyway, I feel like time's pretty straightforward. I don't feel like I really need to tell you what time literally does. There's different ways of time traveling. Aradia, the young lady on the left, all of her different versions end up ditching their own timelines, because in Homestuck there is one true alpha timeline. It is the only timeline that is like going to continue forward. All other timelines are considered doomed timelines, and eventually everyone and everything in them will fade away into non-existence. They are doomed to such a fate. All of her versions eventually come to the alpha timeline, and when they fight the final boss of the game, not the final boss of Homestuck, the story, but of the Trolls game, Scrub, she has an army of herself, and only one survives. Also, she's in a robot, but that's not really relevant to the time part. We meet her as a ghost, and then her ghost goes into a robot, and then she god tiers later and becomes person. I should have put her god tier on here actually. Instead of this version, because this is the version of her before she died, and which is the version we see the least of. Anyway, but then you have Dave on the right, and his time power is more like creating stable time loops. So if Dave needs to eat an apple at 6:08 p.m. to make sure that things stay on the alpha timeline, a second Dave will arrive at 6:08 from the future going, here's your apple, eat this right now. And then, yeah, it creates, bam, we fixed the timeline. We've made sure things happen in the proper order. It's very like Dave's way of time is very much like time is a circle kind of deal. Like everything you do has to circle back into itself. The cause is also the effect, I guess. Anyway, also you can see that the time symbol is a cog, which I find very interesting, a gear, because a big aspect of having time powers is making sure you don't fuck everything up, which is interesting because Caliborn, this from the little green guy who goes on to be the final villain, his time power as an OP little bastard that he is that everything that happens in the alpha timeline creates one big circle that makes sure that he exists. He is like, if all time players are cogs in a clock, he is the clock. They all exist to everything exists to propagate his existence in the wheel of time. It is the phrase that gets used is he's already here, because when they start setting him up as the villain, normally you're like, when will the villain arrive? But like, he's always here. He exists at all points in time simultaneously. He is time, essentially, manifest. His class spec is Lord of Time, so Time Lord, ha 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 ha, like Doctor Who. Yes, time's pretty literal. The literal version of time is pretty obvious, I suppose. I guess the figurative versions of it would be like change, as time passes, things naturally change. There's a lot of things to do with death with time, like Dave collects jarred specimens and such. Aradia is literally a ghost when we meet her, and she's very fascinated by death, and she can hear the voices of every version of her that's ever died in another timeline. Caliborn becomes undying, unkillable, so he sort of defeats death by like being existence that kind of goes beyond time and life and death and yada yada. So you know how like sometimes when death gets personified and he has like, they go to like death's abode and he has all these hourglasses, and it's like, when this hourglass runs out, this person dies, yada yada. There's a thing like that, but everyone who god tiers in Homestuck has a clock, and there are 3 results on the clock. When you die, the clock pendulum swings, and your death is either considered just, heroic, or neither. If your death is heroic, considered heroic, or just, you die. And if it's neither, you continue to live. Becoming god tier gives you, what is the word they use? Something conditional immortality. So long as your death is not just or heroic, you will not die. Caliborn destroys his own clock, which makes him unkillable. It doesn't matter if his death is just or heroic, he cannot die. Which is why he's a problem at the end. But yes, so quite literally, a very literal interpretation of that, I guess. Nostalgia is also a factor, I would say, into that sort of thing. Being stuck in kind of like how I said breath is like a bird in a cage, but for time players, it's more about like feeling like time isn't moving forward, like you're stuck in stasis or in limbo, I suppose. I feel like a lot of time players would be the type to like enjoy taking snapshots, or they'd be the type to really hate taking photos of themselves, and they would hate looking back on it. Again, 2 sides of a coin with that whole thing. They'd either really like nostalgia or they'd really hate it. But I think they'd have a strong opinion on it one way or the other. I don't know if this is coincidental. I do think a lot of time players tend to be kind of going with the gear symbolism. They tend to be people who are constantly working and feel like they need to be like doing something. But I think that could be coincidental, to be fair. It's just an interesting thing to note, I suppose. Um, a fuck. I had like a very specific thing I was about to say, and I lost it. Shit. What the hell was it? I don't know. I don't know what it was. Okay, now I'm mad that I lost because I feel like I had like a thing, and I was like, "That's good. I need to talk about that in like 2 seconds," and then I talked about a couple other things, and then I lost it. Anyway, yes, but time is, I mean, very literal. I feel like even in its metaphorical things, time is also, you can only make time so metaphorical because time is a concept that I think you can't grasp the same way you can grasp the idea of wind blowing or light shining on you or such. I think time can never only be so literal because time is itself a construct that we made up. Like, yeah, the earth spins around the sun, but you know, everything we use to label the passing of time is stuff we made up, which I guess is true of everything, but I think you know what I mean. I don't think people can grasp the concept of time the way you can grasp the idea of like reading a book and now you know things better, or wind blowing through your hair, or a tree growing. Time and space are like the two most important aspects, you could argue, and it's kind of implied that in any game, any version of the game, if you don't have both a time and space player, that you're doomed to fail. This isn't confirmed, but well, actually, I think one character does say as much, but I don't trust their. I feel like that character's information is sometimes dubious, but either way. But yes. There is also like an implication of like time being tied to like masculinity and space being tied to femininity, but like not in a like wearing dresses versus a suit kind of way, but in a very like space is, you know, the frog, the mother frog giving birth to a bunch of frog babies. And time is like the lions hunting for big prey at night because that's just what they're naturally inclined to do. I don't know how to. It's like a more natural version of it, I guess. I don't know if I'm explaining this. It's not like male and female in a more gendered way. It's like in a more universal kind of way. Like space is creation, time is destruction kind of deal. Because all things slowly wither at the hands of time. But the empty vat void of space is from where all things are born. I don't know. I hope that makes sense. Anyway. But yes. How would I wrap up the time thing? I don't know. I feel like that's a good way to say it, is that time is the inevitable change and destruction and death of all things. But that's obviously not like a bad thing inherently. Like time is a natural, very important aspect both in Homestuck and in real life, but it's also something that's hard to fully grasp. And you could say that even the people in the time aspect, they all have their own ideas of how time works that don't really like link up with each other. The same way where if you read multiple stories about time travel, different authors will have different ideas of how time travel should work. Um, so yeah. Time travel is also interesting because it's very, you could argue that it's one of the most overpowered abilities, but it also comes with the most responsibilities because you can fuck things up really bad if you time travel improperly. Um, as Dave says at one point, you know, something dead Daves will start piling up, and dead Daves are the enemy. Um, so yes, all right. I'm gonna take a break, and then we're gonna move on to the heart aspect, which is another interesting one, I feel like. So, PRB. Oh, Haito. Hello, Ray. Thank you for the daily news. All right. So, moving on. Next we have Heart. The symbol for this one is a heart. Surprise, surprise. So Heart is kind of in the like Kingdom Hearts sense, where it's like the soul, the self, emotions, identity, yada yada, things like that. It can also be things like emotions. Did I say emotions already? Anyway, so let's see. Dirk there on the right is a Prince of Hearts, and the Prince class is described to us as a destroyer class. It destroys its aspect or through its aspect. So another way to, a more like cool way, I suppose, to call someone a Prince of Heart would be like a destroyer of souls. And Dirk gets an ability at one point that lets him like zap someone and like pull their soul out of their body. Kind of fucked up. Nepeta there on the left, one of the two cat girls you see here, is very into like shipping. Specifically, she has a wall in her home where she draws every possible shipping combination between her and her 11 friends, and keeps a close tab on that sort of stuff in the friend group. She's, I don't remember, I'm trying to remember if she actively writes fanfics or not. She would be the type to write fanfics on AO3 though. Don't remember what class Bulin is. Sorry. Actually, I don't. Oh no, Nepeta is a rogue of heart. That's what she is. What is Mulan? I'm gonna have to look this up. Mage of Heart. Okay. We don't really know a lot about her. She gets like most of what we see of her, she's being like mind controlled by an evil clown guy into a relationship with him. So that's a whole thing, I guess. I don't really have much to say about her. Anyway, we'll talk about the other two. Regardless, Hearts. It's kind of the opposite of Mind. So like, this is about like, I don't know, it's very emotional and about like, like the soul, I guess, like figurative soul, in like behind why someone would do a thing, as opposed to the logic behind why someone would do a thing. Dirk also has an interesting thing about him where he has a tendency to splinter his own self by creating like having all these different versions of himself. Like he has these AI sunglasses with an AI version of him that he made when he was 13, So it's kind of like an alternate version of himself that he carries around on his own face, and to have beef. So in a way, he has beef with himself. Um, I mentioned him being a Prince of Hearts, which makes him like a destroyer of souls, destroyer of hearts. He's very self-destructive, and he kills his own emotions. And he also kind of does that to his friends. Like he tends to sort of treat their emotions like they're not really worth much. Like if you get too lost in your own emotions, you're just getting lost in the weeds, I guess. Yeah. He does, when he becomes the villain in the epilogues, he does also get the ability to affect like to change people's like other people's sense of self and identity and stuff. And so that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of keep just coming back to the like. I feel like it's kind of a cop-out answer, but I think Kingdom Hearts is probably the best piece of media if you wanted to have a think piece on heart and how the many ways it can go. Like, Sora would be a heart player, but I think so would someone like Xemnas. Like, they circle around, you know, these ideas of like the soul and the self and emotions and identity and yada yada. But they're on opposite sides of it. Xemnas is of the belief that he is incapable of true emotions and feelings and such, but wants that for himself. Whereas Sora is so empathetic that he is literally able to house other people's hearts within himself. So yes, I feel like that's a decent enough way to put it. I feel like the heart and the soul are things that have been explored so much in media that I don't feel like I have much to say. Like it's you know, it could be, you know, your persona that you put on in front of other people, or lack thereof. You know, the ability to see personalities in inanimate objects, or the belief that like doing so is just inherently dumb. I don't know. Things like that. Your ability to dissect your own personality and morals and such, or your inability to do so. All that fun stuff. I think a good way to put it is if the mind, we'll get to the mind aspect later, but the mind aspect is the left brain, the heart is the right brain. Or I don't even know if that's the whole left brain, right brain thing is even really like as true as it's always been said to be, but you know, like that's a good way to put it that most people will get. I think a meddlesome heart player would be the type to try to like manage everyone around them's like emotional well-being and stuff, maybe to the detriment of them or their friends. They might be really empathetic, or they might be the type to project their own feelings on other people and mistake that as empathy. They might mistake their own self-hatred as self-reflection. Yeah. the self, the soul, the heart, the persona, or whatever the outward version of yourself you put on, but also feelings behind it. Yeah. Anyway. Rage. Okay, this one's kind of weird, and I feel like maybe probably one of the more abstract ones. And we only have 2 characters that are in this aspect, which makes it a bit more difficult to talk about. But I feel like rage is not just the literal being angry, though we do see that Gamzee does literally go on a killing spree at one point. But I feel like it's also like, okay, so it's the opposite of hope. So, but you know, in the same way that too much hope, too much positivity can be a negative thing, I think rage is both a positive and negative thing. I think whereas hope is a lot more about like a better tomorrow, rage is about like pairing. If a hope person would be working towards a better tomorrow, a rage person would be like, why wait till tomorrow? Let's fix it right now, burn it all down and build it up again. Trying to think. Like I said, this was probably the hardest one. Okay, I guess we'll go into the literal interpretations and I'll try to go from there. So Gamzee is a bard of rage. Gamzee is the guy on the left wearing the fake god tier outfit with a cod piece for some reason. Oh, so the guy on the right is the one I mentioned, the evil clown that's mind controlling the bullshit aspect. Yeah, rage is probably the weirdest one to get into. But hello, Zoli. The bullshit family. It do be bullshit. Gamzee literally, kind of like how I talked about Rose at one point having her alcoholic arc. Gamzee eats pies that make him like very mild and, you know, drugged out and mellow. But once he gets off the pies, he loses his shit. And goes on a killing spree. He doesn't actually do that much killing though, to be fair. Like, there's 3 people there's three perpetrators all at once. So it's really not even that bad in retrospect. If anything, I feel like the worst thing he does is he becomes a manipulative motherfucker. The ultimate rage baiter, if you will. There's also very heavy ties, but see, the thing with like the super heavy ties with hope and rage to religious iconography is very interesting. But the 2 rage dudes especially. Yeah, Vriska should be dead and stay dead. Well, I was thinking more about what he does to Terezi, but yeah. He does do that as well. Yeah, there's a lot of religious iconography tied to rage, especially, which I find very interesting. Because I do feel like I didn't even spend any thought on that relationship because it's so stupid. Yeah, that's fair. Because like Hope has angels, which is interesting, but really they don't delve into it in any real direct way, the religious iconography tied to Hope. But they really delve into the culty nature of the whole thing going on with Gamzee and such, and Gamzee's obsession with Caliborn. I don't know. This one is like, it's just very, it's the hardest one to really like really nail down like specifics. Valid. I don't know, because I don't like, maybe he did upset God to the point he created a great flood to start over. True, he did do that. I don't like just saying rage. Like, I feel like boiling it down to just rage is angry. True, I didn't think about that. But yeah, I guess there's also maybe something to the fact that the two rage based bound people we meet are like tend to be on it very extremes in that regard a lot of the time. Like Carlos, that's his name, right? Yeah. Curlos, that's it. Literally stitched his mouth shut. As like a whole religious thing. The purple high swap troll is blatantly Gamzee with barely any changes. I barely remember anything about the high swap trolls. I'm gonna be so real with you. Yeah. I'm most of my interest in Homestuck is the web comics and the epilogues, which aren't a comic, but you know. I don't know. Rage is good sometimes. These two suck, but I feel like there's a lot of interpretations where the rage aspect could be a very positive thing. Like I said earlier, too much hope is bad sometimes. So, you know, sometimes you got to get angry. Be actually base to the next high swap. He takes off his hat and is like, yeah, I'm actually Gamzee, fuck you. That would be pretty funny, actually. Takes off his hat and replaces it with another cod piece on his head. All right, I'm moving on. We're going to blood. Oh yeah, there are only 2 blood characters, which feels weird because I feel like, I don't know, maybe because we get to hang out with Karkat so much that I forget that there's a small amount of characters actually in this one. So like blood is usually tied, so blood is the opposite of breath. So where breath is like the Karkat aspect, it's when you're Karkat-esque. I mean, within Homestuck, I would argue all characters' aspects, if they're not the first person of that aspect to be introduced, their aspectness is how much like the first character of that aspect are they. The breath aspect is your John-esqueness, etc. I would argue the void aspect and the light aspect are both how Rose are you. But anyway, so it's like instead of freedom, blood is more like I guess obligations. Is that a good word for it? Like where John is very restless and dicks around his house, and shit. Yeah, foreverly tied up. I think somebody who's happy within their aspect and breath is someone who's, you know, constantly moving from place to place or thing to thing, and blood is like somebody who's very stuck in a structural sort of lifestyle, I would say. Like Karkat's whole thing when we meet him is he just wants to be the leader. I still need to read Karkat Goes to Convention. I haven't actually read that one yet. I also like that. I like that sentence out of context. Karkat goes to a convention, does really cool stuff with blood. But yes. Karkat, he wants to be the leader of the team. When they start playing the game, he considers himself a natural born leader. And he ends up being a good leader by being a bad leader, you could argue. Like, I think one of the most accurate and smartest things Vriska ever said was when she was talking about Karkat, and she was like, by being whiny and annoying, he actually kind of convinced us all to get shit done. Would it be fair to relate this to blood in the sense of family? Yeah, that is one way to do it. Like, blood is thicker than water, for sure. Family ties and structure and obligation and blood, and not putting anyone above blood. Yeah, I would say so, for sure. I think blood aspect people will take a like betrayal as way harder than any other aspect, or they would be the traitor, I guess, maybe in like if they were like a bard or a prince in the destructive type, but I guess we never see that play out, so that's, you know, speculation. But, you know, like I keep saying, it's kind of the two sides of a coin. It's the fact that it's tied to those themes is what's important. Groups, a group or a community or a family, or a hierarchy, just some sort of like, you know, structural grouping, I suppose. And whether you're happy in it or not, I guess. I mean, literally, so Karkat is his blood is red, but for trolls that's a mutation. That's a very rare mutation. But his blood being red allows him to befriend well, allows, I guess, him to befriend, quote unquote, a very important character that leads to them being able to, you know, win the game. So, you know, that's a whole other aspect. Like he's able to forge, what would the word be? Not a bond. I mean, kind of a bond. He does feel very close to Jack, and he's sad that a different version of Jack ended up being evil. Even though it's a different version, it still like genuinely upsets him. Like a pact, I guess. A literal blood pact. They cut their hands and shake hands. X-Jack is a beautiful thing. Agreed. So yeah, and I actually never thought about it, but because Karkat's the one that's so insistent on fucking with the humans because he sees John and it's hate at first sight. That's why they end up working together when everything's said and done. So yeah, you know, as a knight of blood, Karkat has a tendency to I would argue he tends to bumble his way into them more often than not, but he does end up forming all of these like groups and packs and bonds and such. And Karkat is, despite his tsundere personality, he very much cares for all of his friends. I think even like Vriska and such, as much as he, from what I can remember, basically says good riddance after she dies. And I do think it's interesting that when Murderstuck starts happening and a bunch of trolls die, we sort of start that through Karkat's perspective, and him being upset about Kanaya and Pfeffery and such. Karkat X Risk is a beautiful thing, but in a scary way, like if you imagine Dracula. I feel like Karkat X Vriska and Karkat X Kanaya are both Dracula, but in two very different ways. Actually, Karkat X Kanaya is Carmilla. Karkat X Kanaya is Porum X Kankri. Fair enough. It's close enough. It's Karkat X Kanaya is Brat and Brat Tamer, and Porum X Kankri is what would I call Kankri? He's just a bottom in every sense of the word. It's a more traditional top-bottom relationship. But anyway, I think we're getting off topic. Yeah, so Karkat he does also end up being like a genuinely very good leader in the epilogues and such as well, and beyond canon. So that's also a thing. But yes, canon that during his session he literally wore just bottoms. I didn't even remember that. Up to his armpits. That's right. Oh, I forgot about that. Inkry got them apple bottom jeans. But yes. So, blood is thicker than water. Blood players tend to be tied down. I think they can turn a lot of blood players would be able to turn any sort of relationship into some sort of partnership, if not friendship. Blood players would tend to be good leaders, or if they're not the actual leader, I think they'd be good at playing the mediator. Like sylphs are meddlesome types, and I think a sylph of blood would be a good sylph of blood would be able to hold even the most like chaotic friend group together and keep it from falling apart. Which, to be fair, Carcat also kind of does until Murder Stuck, but you know, being stuck on a meteor does things to you when you're a murderous clown or a spider lady or an incel who thinks he's Harry Potter. But anyway, so yeah, I think a breath player would see there are a lot of obligations they have in life as like chains. But I think a blood player would wear their obligations like a cape. Like they would wear it with pride. Yeah, Homestuck is a wacky wild time. Oh show. Yeah. I think we've covered enough of it, I suppose. Get the gist across. Doom. So Doom is another one that is kind of like Rage, where I feel like Rage and Doom are the ones that like arguably get kind of the least explanation of it. But I'd say Doom is tied to like Doom is the opposite of life. Where so life is like grossest slide. Why the green, or because of the characters on it? I'd say kind of like they do be green, and it's not a particularly pleasing green, I agree. But it's the green that Andrew presumably chose. Somebody working on Homestuck at some point chose this green. I mean, I guess it's better than it being their blood color, because that's not a very pleasant yellow to look at either. But yeah, it's kind of tied to like determinism, I think, like where life is sort of like you can kind of keep blooming and growing infinitely like a redwood. Doom would be like you know, the flip side of that. If life is what could be, Doom is what will be. Doom is the ghost of Christmas future, and life is Ebenezer Scrooge on Christmas Day. And the second chance he was given. I mean, Solix literally not. We won't get into all the minutia of Caliborn and his always here-ness, but Solix does quite literally snatch a code off of a strange server that is set to go off at the end of the universe. And he likes coding in the till death coding language, which I believe, if I remember the way it's described right, everything executes based on the the ending of a certain thing's lifespan. So if you wanted something to go off very quickly, you would tie its execution to the lifespan of a mosquito or something. So quite literally, he codes in a coding language tied to the death of things. And, you know, I've always found the fact that Doom is so far from time on the wheel interesting, because I've always felt like they share a lot in terms of like their ties to like fate and death and stuff. But maybe that's just me. I think I feel like the positives of Doom would be that I think trying to think of how to word this. Accepting reality for the way that it is, I suppose. Maybe too much so. Like if you want to consider like life players and the people adjacent to them on the wheel, like optimists, I think Doom players would be the most pessimistic, which is true of Solix. He's a very pessimistic guy. But he keeps it real sometimes, and I think he helps to ground the difference between life and space. Fair, I suppose, because Doom does lean more towards space, I guess. Well, I mean, literally on the wheel, it's closer to space, and life is closer to time. But I definitely would say Solix, at least, is the type to be he's a very grounding horse to much bubblier or much more like head in the clouds type people. Whereas I think others might it's kind of like how I said hope can be a bad thing. I think too much optimism can be a bad thing. Like I think the extreme of a Doom type person might be like a doomsday prepper, where they're ready for the apocalypse to happen tomorrow. But a more balanced idea would be somebody who keeps, like, when it's winter time and they live in a place where, you know, if it snows, it can get you stuck in the house for a couple days. They would be the type that always had enough food to last through like a bad snowstorm. They would just like assume it's going to happen. I feel like, you know, kind of inevitable. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much the gist of what I have to say about it, really. I forgot how Kingdom Heartsy this song sounds. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those that's a little weird in that I feel like Doom and Rage get explored less than pretty much any other aspects. Because I mean, Solix has powers, but his power is his psionics. Well, I mean, both of their powers are psionics, but what is Matuna? I actually don't remember what. Last bit is use an Air of Doom. Okay. I mean, I guess that kind of tracks. I guess since he ends up getting turned into a living battery, unable to die. Well, up until that what the final jump they make to Earth, but that's a whole thing, I guess. And Solix is pretty obsessed with like, because now, yeah, I guess now I didn't think about it, but Solix, the whole reason Solix wants to play Scrub is because it's supposed to stop the it's supposed to be the answer to the trolls going extinct. So he's like undoing the doom of troll kind in a sense. So yeah. Don't know. That's about all I have to say on this one, I think. Okay, well then I'm gonna take another break and then we're gonna go talk about Void. I did not realize when I stuck her on here that you cannot really tell where her bandana ends and the background begins, but that's okay. Anyway, this is mine. Select dust it like a saucy maid, and that's all there is to say on the matter. Correct. All right. We'll talk about Void when I get back. PRB. Kaito. I'm back. Also, this it's about to end, so I'm gonna pull up a different bunch of music real quick. I'm just gonna do volume 9, I guess. That was 10, so we'll go backwards. Anyway, void is the opposite of light. Where listen to that leitmotif. Where light is, luck and relevance and knowledge and such, the void is all the opposite side of those things. I feel like you could kind of say luck has like two sides of itself, whereas we see Vriska always bending luck to her will, and I think you could argue that anyone who's knowledgeable enough can always kind of put the odds in their favor. I think void is more of a true randomness. If light is if light is reading a book and then looking up as many interviews as you can with the author to get as many explanations for as many dangling plot threads and stuff as possible, void is finishing the book and going, all right, cool, I'm satisfied. Which is a thing in the official quiz that I think is actually not very good, but does exist, so but yes, mystery, obfuscation, nothingness, the hidden, the meaningless, yada yada yada. All right, cool. There we go. So we have, one of my favorite characters and one of the best characters objectively in Homestuck, Roxy, is a rogue of void. Which I feel like when I say those, I feel like it's very easy to imagine what kind of things Roxy would do. Like when I tell you that Roxy, the rogue of void, at one point gets a ring that lets them go invisible. I don't think that would be very surprising to anybody. I mentioned with Rose that Void has an interesting tie to alcohol, and the way that it muddles your mind and such. When we meet Roxy, she's a 16-year-old alcoholic. Extremely powerful thought of Equius x Roxy. I've never thought about that, and I'm going to continue not to think about that. But I'm willing to look up how many of those exist on AO3. Out of my own curiosity. Weird enough to accept his weirdness. I think Roxy is probably the most shippable with anyone, arguably the most shippable with any one character, because I think Roxy would be down to try basically anything once. What's that? I mean, she's all about what the fuck, Arceus Sprite, whatever, and his bulging muscles. So you know, that's a thing. There you are. Let's see. There are. I have to include both versions of this. Oh wait, shit. Icarius / Roxy. Oh no, there's only the one. Okay. Okay. Sort and filter. 15. He does share. He is an heir. Oh shit. You're right. I never caught that. I guess that makes it viable, but there's only 15 things shipping them together. How many of them are explicit? 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. There you go. 1/5 of them are explicit. Anyway, so literal interpretations of Void. When Roxy gets off the sauce, her session blacks out and can't be seen by other people using things like Trollian. Aqueous' blood gets used to literally block out is it just Gamzee's name from the book? Can't remember. I think it's just Gamzee's. It's important, arguably important information from Rose's book that ends up with Calliope, who we haven't talked about yet, but in the Alternian timeline, what is your name? I can never remember this guy's name. Also Lord English. That's what I couldn't remember if it was just Gamzee or if it was also Lord English stuff. And probably Caliborn's name and stuff like that. Anything that like name drops any of those. Anyone who is directly, I would guess anyone who is a piece of Lord English, their name probably gets blocked out. Horus, that's it. Oh, because it's like horse. Duh. That's such an easy way to remember that. Horus, this guy on the left in the Alternian timeline, he, if I remember right, in Mindfang's journal, she talks about how he's always kind of had this ability to lay low and not really get bothered by the upper class who he betrayed and ran away from. Oh, right, because he has Scratch's ball. Horus is a real name, but it's not spelled like Horus here. But Horus is, I've never met anyone named Horus. I'm not sure how I feel about it as a name. But yeah. What is Horus's class? I actually don't remember. Age. Okay. Interesting. We're gonna talk about classes. I was just curious. But yeah. So I feel like there's just generally a strong tie with Liquid with the Void class, which I always found interesting. Like I would argue it's kind of got a lot of ties to Light and Dark, or Void, both have a lot of ties to water. Vriska's planet is a pirate themed world. Rose is covered in ocean, in like a rainbow ocean. I actually don't really remember. Again, Aqueous' world. Let me look it up. It is Land of Caves and Silence. Okay. Yeah, water in the 8-ball. Yeah, that's a big thing. The dark, sort of watery place inside the 8-ball before the fucking little dye surfaces. The alcohol thing that I mentioned before. Aqueous really likes milk. Also has no real info. Yeah, the 8-ball is a symbol of, you know, it's a good, the 8-ball versus the cue ball are good symbols of like light versus dark, where the 8-ball gives you an answer, but it doesn't mean anything. The answer it gives you is meaningless. When you look into a cue ball, it gives you the correct answer, but only if you can actually see inside of the cue ball, which most people cannot do. You know. But yeah. You know, I didn't think about this, but I feel like I feel like Doom aspects, almost you could almost say they're the like nothing matters. So why bother? And Avoid would be the nothing matters, so why not just do what you want? Like not inherent, I guess, not necessarily in every single case, but I feel like I could see that being a common thing, a difference between Void and Doom. At least with my own views on them. I'm trying to think because Roxy and John are the survivors of Game Over. I'm trying to think of how I would tie in Roxy's Rogue of Void aspect into her surviving that. I mean, on a literal sense, she grabs Rose and teleports her out, but it doesn't save Rose. I feel like that's something I'd have to think harder on and separately. But I'd never put those two things together. But that is interesting. That you could almost argue that Roxy was just irrelevant enough to not be killed. That's true. Yeah. What was her Denison's name? Let's just go with John. Yeah. And then in the other one, she just sort of unceremoniously dies so that this version of her can so like the one Roxy we know can replace the other one. In a way, you could argue that version of Roxy that died in the retcon timeline was one of the most irrelevant characters to the entire plot. Which is interesting to think about. Yeah. Uh, also not. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. Um, hmm. I also think that like it's interesting how Equius, you could argue he's held back by his attachment to the blood cast and its own relevance. Mara said, if you go with John, your friends will know the loss you suffered. And she was like, okay, sure. Nix. I was going to say, I don't remember her name being Chimera. Yeah. Right. Very interesting. Lot to dissect. Roxy's a pretty important character from, you know, in it throughout all of Act 6. I mean, in a lot of different ways. So I feel like just by being a character in Act 6, that opens up a lot of interesting things to dissect about the void aspect. You know, also she's in the whole thing, in the whole love polygon for Jake's attention. She's the one who's kind of just accepts early on that she's probably not going to get any, and that it's going to be either Jake or Dirk. And she sort of takes herself out of the running there. Like, she still flirts a lot, obviously, but I'd be curious. I feel like is it void like for your narrative plot to just be bullshit after Act 6, Act 5? That's the most void like thing possible, baby. Let's go. Yeah. I feel like Roxy's varying gender stuff, I would argue, feels like it could be tied into the void stuff as well. How we have trans Roxy in Meat, but in Candy, Roxy's take on gender is it doesn't really matter because I'm a mom first. And that's what I'm focusing on. Like, yes, I think in another, she basically says in that timeline, she's basically a she-they in that timeline, I would argue, in that it's very like, I probably could have gone down a very different route, but I'm more concerned about the fact that I'm a mom, non-gender mommy, pretty much. Yeah. Mommy, gender neutral. But like not in a sexual, like literally a mom, void gender. Yeah. So that's interesting too. Yeah, I don't know. This is more of a joke thing, but I think Equius, the fact that Equius basically accomplishes nothing throughout Murderstuck, despite, you know, wanting to protect Nepeta, you could kind of argue is a sort of tragic version of being an heir of void. He inherited the role of being a character that accomplished basically nothing. Rip Horseman. So yeah, I feel like I have a lot to say on Void, but I think I'm biased because I've considered myself inherited being Pfeffery. So true. I've considered myself Void ever since I got into Homestuck enough to look into class specs and all that. So I've probably thought about it the most. So we'll move on. Space. I made the background white because all their hair is black and their hair would just blend into the background. So I'm sorry that this is a flash bomb. I was going to make it green, but then I thought it looked weird. And also Mind and Doom are also green. So you get a bright white background. Um, I want to see them bald. Everyone knows space. True. Especially Easton. I considered putting Calliope here in their troll getup just for the funnies, but I didn't. I put Calibor in his space is so crowded. I know, it's kind of ironic that it's one of the ones with the most characters. I kind of mentioned that, like, not in like a gender way, but in a more like nature kind of way, naturey kind of way, that space is tied to like it tends to get tied to like birth and other things that could be kind of associated with being more feminine. And I think that is one, because like I said, I feel like space is, you know, the vastness from which all things form. Yeah. But also quite literally Kanaya, second from the left here, is Caliborn's so mad at the Megiddos for bringing his time aspect sausage party. Honestly, real and true. I think he'll never recover. I never thought about how time is a 50-50 split gender wise, and I mean, I can't remember what actually, does Calliope go by a certain gender, or isn't she gender like non-binary in the epilogues and such? I mean, they call her she, but I think in the epilogues, or in Homestuck, but I think in the epilogues Calliope is gender, is like they in the epilogues. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I couldn't remember for sure. Right. You'll notice I refer to a lot of characters by their characters who have gender changes or journeys later on. I usually refer to them by their Homestuck one, I guess. Homestuck original, whatever, Homestuck, what they are in Homestuck, because that is what I'm most familiar with. But I also tend to refer to a character, it depends on what part of the story I'm referring to. Like, I would refer to specifically trans Roxy as he, but when I refer to like this version of Roxy that we just saw, I will always say she, because, you know. Fusion, ha. The Batara earrings. But yes, Kanaya, quite literally. So there's this thing with the trolls called the Mother Grub, and it's where all of the trolls are born from. And Kanaya, when the Mother Grub dies, Kanaya's in charge of taking care of the Mother Grub. And when it dies, she gets the matriorb, which is basically the egg that the Mother Grub will hatch from. And so it is quite literally on Kanaya to get the matriorb through the game to the end goal so that more trolls can be born. Well, technically we don't know if Calliope had to make a frog. Actually, did she even get in the game? I remember right, it's implied that because her game was impossible, she just kind of, or alt Calliope, I should say, she just kind of died after winning out. Mother Grub's oozing vestigial third oral sphincter is canon. So is the incestuous slurry. I think it's funny that the narration purposely tries to make all the Mother Grub stuff sound gross, because you know, it's an alien species, so like to us it would, for a lot of humans it would just be gross. Yeah, This is a Spurb party, kid. Get out of here. I always forget that no version of Calliope can make it into Spurb. That's very strange considering that Alt Calliope is literally creates the black hole and is super fucking powerful in that regard. But in a way, you could argue that just existence is all of existence is Spurb in a way. You ain't alt, you ain't ballin'. Real. But yes. So all space players, their goal is to breed frogs until they make what is called the Genesis frog, and the Genesis frog goes into the forge and gets shot out like a cannonball and becomes the next universe, because the game Spurb is basically how universes propagate and make new ones. Like a cannonball. Yeah. What are you going more the insemination route? Is that what you're implying? I mean, I guess that's one way to look at it, and it definitely has the long tail and stuff, but you know. This is a PG stream, obviously. This is G for general audiences. Spurb should be rated M. Yeah. I think Spurb should be rated M because a bunch of 13-year-olds being isekai'd after the world ends gives them way too much freedom. But yes, so that's a whole other thing. I feel like if time, to reference the quiz that I think, the official quiz that I think isn't very good but does have some interesting things in it, they compare time to being, you know, in space, like the journey versus the destination, where time is the destination and space is the journey, which is like, not maybe not the best way to put it, TBF, I don't think, but I think it's an interesting way to think about it. I think it shares a lot with Void and like the randomness, like I said, the emptiness of space where all things come from, and all of life came to be. Which is the journey? Space. An interesting... Is this really spacey though? I'm not sure actually. The way Calliope likes writing fanfics and doing fan art of everyone. As a start and the end of the journey. That's fair. I mean, that's probably a better way to put it, honestly. Space is the beginning of the journey where anything is possible, and time is yeah, that's the moving clock of it happening, because she basically puts the whole thing into motion and puts it up right. That is a very fair point. I do think one thing that's very spacey about the Calliope is her whole spiel about how a story is a circle essentially, and the start of the story is just wherever someone chooses to start telling it. I think that's an interesting thing that she has going on. Right. Right. Very true. Very true. That is interesting. I never thought of that before. I also find it interesting that Jade, as the space player, is the one with like 40 million different hobbies, as opposed to everyone else having much more clear interests when we meet them. Which, even if that wasn't initially intended to be a space thing, I think, again, by virtue of Jade being the first space player we meet, you know, the aspect is kind of defined by her. She is quite the pattern breaker, and also quite the sleeper. Talk about a sleeper agent, am I right? Though I guess, to be fair, Kanaya doesn't have that going on. She's got pretty clear interest when we meet her, so maybe that's more of a witch thing. But no, because Vefri doesn't. I don't know. Maybe it's just Jade. Jade's just like that. She just be like that. But yeah. I do think space is a more like very open, I guess. Whereas I think time does tend to be very about to be on the nose about it. It's a lot about the working cogs in the machine and such. Two sides of the same movie. Well, that's true of every set of aspects. Is there two sides? Light and void are two opposites. Mind and heart are two sides of the same coin. Yeah. But time and space are the two arguably most relevant aspects, which is, I guess why they have 4 people in them. So yeah. I feel like, yeah, I guess it's the emptiness. Space is the emptiness at the beginning and end of everything, I guess is a good way to put it. And time is all the turning gears that happen in between. Also, in a literal sense, if we want powers, Jade gets teleportation powers and can shrink and grow stuff at will. She's also a dog. Anyway, mind. 2 little gremlins here. Rezi is also one of the best characters in Homestuck, undeniably. Annoying dog first guardian theory. Oh. Annoying dog is the first guardian of Deltarune and Undertale. I mean, it tracks with the whole, with the being just a plain white dog and everything. Honestly, is Toby spacebound? I don't know what I'd say Toby is. I don't think I know enough about Toby. Let's try to guess. I mean, honestly, I would call Scratch a lightbound first guardian. Because the whole cue ball thing. I know he's literally tied to Lord English, but you know. He's gonna put it all the way at the end, true. Anyway, mind. Kind of the opposite of heart. So, whereas I think a heart player on a general thing, unless you're, you know, destructive type, like class type, like Dirk, I suppose. I think heart players is Gaster the alt Calliope of Deltarune. Oh, I don't know. That's the see. We don't know enough about Gaster yet. Game girl, let's go. Anyway, we'll find out. We'll see. But yeah, cause and effect, action, consequence. A plus B equals C, I suppose. Terezi literally wants to be a prosecutor. And ends up being, or Terezi is a seer of mind. Which, so Rose is a seer of light, which lets her see like the most fortuitous paths. Terezi more so sees like when she really like gets into it, she can see like exactly what, you know, the actions. Oh, sorry, I smacked my mic. Somebody would take, which is what leads her to being able to predict exactly what Vriska is going to do in Act 5, which does lead to her killing Vriska at the end. I mean, with some, you know, effect from Gamzee, but that's a side thing. But yeah. Sorry, I keep getting distracted by Game Girl rapping in the background. She goes, your next line is, yeah, is Joseph Joestar a mind player? Is that what we're getting at? I wouldn't be surprised. Hermit Purple. But yeah, very logic focused. Whereas, you know, I think, like I said before, I feel like Dirk comes off as so cold and logical because I think he actively kills his own emotions or tries to pretend he doesn't care when he does and such. Which I do think one of the, even during some of the less good parts of Beyond Canon, I've liked Dirk's characterization as the antagonist guy, and how he, you know, since he's the one narrating during his sections, he becomes an unreliable narrator, and trying to like read between the lines of what he says is kind of fun. I don't know. Like how he's so cool and cold and calculating, but he also brought his daughter along on his quest. Which, to be fair, I feel like he kind of, there are parts where he does admit that it's not just cold and logic that made him do that, but you know, he does it a little reluctantly, even when he does admit it. Anyway, but yes, the mind bound players are more in the realm of cold hard facts, I suppose, of it, the logic of it, the rule, playing things by the rules. I mean, literally, Red Glare loses to Vriska because Red Glare tries to play things by the established rules of the court system. So when Mindfang mind controls the crowd to attack Red Glare and hang her from the gallows, Red Glare just never saw it coming. I genuinely think that was never a possibility to Red Glare. It wasn't on the table. It wasn't a factor. Yeah. Well, you know, Mindfang, Arania, Vriska, you know, they be like that. Always with the loopholes and the such. I mean, another thing that specifically Terezi does is the whole thing of her whole coin, her way of keeping Dave from making the timeline stuff complicated is her whole coin flipping thing, where when Dave does that, gets told that it landed on heads and does this, and then a second Dave gets told it landed on tails and does the other thing. What? Only Arania thing going in my cannon box is her Lucy cardboard stand. Well, that's the best thing she ever did, so. Let's see. But yeah. And then, of course, when John gets the retcon powers and you know, she gives John, sets up the password system and all that jazz to keep things neat and tidy from getting out of hand. I definitely don't think a Heart player, or really any other class or aspect, would be as likely to play by the rules. Although I think I feel like a Prince or Bard of Mind would probably be like a real rule breaker, but I guess it would depend on how you characterize them. So, with them being the destructive mind classes. But we never see that, so, you know, it's up to your own interpretation, I suppose. And yeah, mine's a cool one. It also doesn't get a ton of exploration. Like a lot of, because Terezi has certain points where she uses her mind powers and it's very clearly what she's doing, but there's also a lot of it is just her being clever and such. And it sort of falls into that area where it's like it's not really a power so much as it's just how she is. I do wish it was a little explored a little bit more, but I feel like it's also one of kind of like Heart. I feel like it's not one you need Explorer to really understand it too well. I feel like there's enough media going over those kind of ideas. You can kind of form your own opinions of how they would work. But yeah. So last up is Hope. I hate all of you. I don't really hate Jake, but he is pretty annoying. The other two, you know, especially you, Cronus. Jesus Christ. So, you know, making them cry, good. Hope is, I feel like Hope is one of those that I probably don't have to say anything about it. I think you know exactly what this aspect is. Ideals, belief, like Jake is at the most powerful we ever see him when he believes in himself, and also when his hopeness is maxed out by Arania, and the version of Dirk he has in his head literally becomes real temporarily. You know, you believe they say something. There's like a, why can she do that? I assume it's her light healing, but you know, like I described it earlier as she basically healed negative his relevancy. Is the best way I could describe it. But yes, I agree. Relevancy injured. Or I guess she healed his ego, maybe you could say. Yes, Act 6 is a whole thing, but we gotta work with what we got. But yes. You know, unflinching optimism at its best or worst, depending on the character. I'm not even gonna talk about Cronus. I don't care. She could die. Shouldn't have even put you on the slide, honestly. You know, it can be too much hope can be good or bad. Obviously, but it gets tied to, you know, like I said, or it has a lot of, when there's like angel thingies that fly out of Jake's hope ball when he's maxed out. So yeah, there's not any direct religious stuff aside from that tied to hope, which I do find interesting, but it is there. But I mean, obviously, if you want to look at religion, for a lot of people, it can, or for some people, their religion is kind of the only thing that allows them to be hopeful. I don't know if John did the windy thing and salamanders just started flying out of it. That'd be pretty funny, actually. I also forgot, I totally forgot that Eridan's, on Eridan's planet, his fucking guys were angels, and they were totally chill until Eridan started trying to kill them. and they were like one of the hardest things in the game to kill. But yeah. Aridin for a while thinks magic is fake bullshit, but then once he believes it's real, he gets a little wand. Maybe they weren't his normal consorts. He probably had some reptiles too. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck was up with the angels, because I don't think we ever hear about anything else on his planet, but we don't really see a lot of the troll planets, TBF, or much of them at least. Or I guess we don't see the consorts on Jake's planet either, do we? I can't remember. I mean, they're all dead, so it doesn't matter. But yes. Or like his Firefly. Ooh, maybe. I didn't think about that. You might be right. But yeah, I feel like Hope's pretty straightforward. Flying. Wahoo. Jake did fly when he was in a Hope Ball. Fireflies, hummingbirds, angels. Yeah, you're right. I never noticed that there is like a secondary resident on a lot of these planets. I can't think of one on Heat and Clockwork though, or Light and Rain. But maybe we just never met them. Maybe Maplehoof was the secret consort of Rose's world, Light and Rain. I think Lolar, right? Maybe you're right. Dave's were the onions, for sure. I'm calling it. But yes. Wait, I'm trying to remember if Jasper's ever mentions actually catching fish on Rose's world. There might have been fish. Who is the Ketis? I don't remember. The whale thingy. Oh, they did all die, right? That's true. Huh. So this is an actual pattern that I've never noticed. That's interesting. Neat. The plan was to have each land poisoned by an element. Right. Yeah, there's a lot of things. It was salt. Oh, maybe. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. Could be. Something like that. Very interesting. It's interesting seeing the stuff that like was probably meant to be more important at one point, but kind of just became set dressing eventually. Kind of like how the first 4 kids all had an instrument, but that fell off going forward. Right. The snow would have been for whatchamacallit? Land of Frogs. What was it called? Whatever Jade's thing was. Amber traps the firefly inside the gear container. Inside the gear container as well. That's true. That's interesting. Very strange. Low fat if it was supposed to be uranium. Oh, that makes more sense. Yeah, you're right. Well, I guess it's not really poisoned by uranium, but it is whatchamacallit, like a kind of reminiscent of a nuclear winter. Huh. I mean, they literally did that with the next 4 kids. They all have they have the elements in the names. And they're all their own issue. Very interesting. Anyway. Hello, Equation. Thank you for the daily dues. But yes, I feel like Hope's pretty on the nose. In a positive sense, I think they could be the kind of they could be the person in the group. Thank you for the daily dues, Oli. That keeps everyone from losing faith, but in a negative sense, they can have way too much. They can be overconfident, or have Jake's sort of false bravado that gets torn down once they're actually in the game. And then Jake just sort of realizes that he's Hope is weirdly lustful in Homestuck for some reason. Well, it's two sides of the coin, I guess. You're either lusty or lusted after. The lusty Argonian from Elder Scrolls is a Hope player. Yeah, because Eridan's whole thing is that he just really wants to get with anyone. Anyone will do. Just somebody, please. And I mean, I guess that's also Cronus's thing, but I don't want to get into Cronus's deal. Thank you for the 10 stream streak equation. And everyone thinks Jake's hot, and all of his friends want to bang him. And in the epilogues, they just they literally just plaster pictures and videos and stuff of his ass everywhere. Whenever Jake's show is doing poorly, they zoom in on his ass and the ratings go back up. That is a weird thing. I just the fact that it's all the Hope players that have so much of that. Very strange. They really went to town on his ass. This is true. So yeah. I mean, I guess one of the more interesting things at the end of the day is if someone was going to write their own fan session. Seen the original Hopes. I think you sent it to me, but I don't really I don't remember what it was. But yeah, if you were gonna run your own fan session or something with your own OCs or your friends, you can kind of bend a lot of these to whatever way you want to. TBF. But I think it's interesting to look at how they're actually used in Homestuck itself, and how certain themes and stuff tie into the different aspects and all that. And yeah, that's it. That's all 12 aspects. They're an interesting thing. They're a lot more delved into than the classes, just in general. Except for the explanation that princes are just an outright active destroyer class from Calliope, who's uh testimony. To be fair, that is just true as far as we've ever seen. But I find I always take everything Calliope has said about any of that stuff with a big, healthy grain of salt. So, you know. I very much think Homestuck is the type of story that will have a character tell you a thing works a certain way and then kind of go on to prove that you can't really box it in quite as easily as you may have been initially told you could. Um, Bam. Wahoo. There she goes. There she blows. There be all of the aspects. Hope this was interesting and worth the channel points. I don't know if I could have talked as much about the classes, I'm gonna be honest. Or if I was gonna try to, I'd have to put a lot more prep into it. You know. Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, I do remember these. Juicy butt slut. Amazing. Well, I guess that was just a thing from the get-go. For some reason. Also, we're ending on a Jake English song, which I find funny. Anyway, stop. Silence. Okay. Yar. With that, yeah, that's it. It's a jaunty version of English. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sunday, will be more Sly 2. And, as well on Tuesday. What is Wednesday? I think Wednesday's probably gonna be... I think it's gonna be another music stream. If we don't finish Sly 2 on Tuesday, we'll do that some more Thursday, and the next week on Friday will be another batch of 4 random NES games. And yeah, with that, BPR, well, Ringo Artiste, very cool, very cool. Keep thinking you mean Sly Stallone. I don't think I know what that is. So here's the read message. He wants to do that. Oh, like Sylvester Stallone. Okay. Yes, yes, yes. I was kind of expecting it to be some like parody thing of the Rocky movies. Yeah, let me go see who we can raid. Potentially. Hmm. I think we shout. Go raid into Lucky Lemon today. They're playing Stardew Valley. Yeah, cool. Sweet. With that, thanks for coming out. What does BPR mean again? Big Papa Ringo. Um, because they made the art and such. I think I said on my stuff. But yes, thanks for coming out. Have a good day, good night, whatever it is for you, and I will see you in the next stream. Mwah. Never mind, they're raiding out right now. Shit. All right, let me find someone else. I didn't realize they were ending. Then I'm gonna raid Luxurious Lady. They're doing a Majora's Mask randomizer, so we're doing that said. All right, bye.